Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, Phil Brown, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. We're going to continue recording for as long as we see fit through the summer here. I have my kid at home, so let's see if this goes according to plan. It's not normal. I get half an hour of peace and quiet while she's here, but we'll see what happens nonetheless. If she makes a guest appearance at some point, please forgive me. How you doing, mate?
Good. As a kind of weekend and things, a whole week without United now, it feels kind of nice and to some degree, and that's all good. Summer getting started. At the same time, we were wondering, would we have much to talk about today because we didn't expect to still be here waiting for answers on so many things. But I do think there are some good things to cover after the Champions League final and some other things that have happened as well.
Yeah, obviously, lots of talk going on right now, as you would expect, relating to issues surrounding the football club. Some of these things I think United should have addressed already. Silence is a bit weird, I'll be honest. We're going to talk, obviously, a little bit about Ten Hag. We'll talk about Bruno meeting with Bayern. Casemiro, some of the stuff that Jose Mourinho said about Sancho and other things. Casemiro and one or two other things. So, probably won't be a 1 hour podcast, but nonetheless, we'll get through what needs to be covered. First of all, mate, it's been a week, just over a week since the FA Cup. Most people thought there would be an announcement on Ten Hag's future immediately after the cup final. That didn't happen. I know lots of people are tired of talking about this. I am, you are. And as we've said before, the only people that can put an end to this are his employers. Fabrizio Romano and others have come out and said that United are still talking to candidates, which we knew anyway. I don't think that's a massive update on the situation. And we're still none the wiser as to what's going to happen next season. We're in June already. Obviously, there's optimism around INEOS and the fact that they're here. But they should be judged just like anyone else. Maybe I'm being unfair, but it's starting to irritate me a bit.
Yeah, understandably. I mean, it's kind of a complicated situation to talk about because if INEOS have been here, I know like people can make a comparison to Liverpool having their manager sorted. Bayern took a long time to get theirs sorted. Barcelona as well, but they're all pretty much sorted now. Chelsea made their decision quickly in their sacking and hiring. If INEOS have been here the whole season, I don't think it would be going like this right now. I don't think, if they'd gotten in last summer, I don't think if it'd be going like this right now. I'm not sure Ten Hag would have lasted the season if they'd gotten in last summer, to be fair. That was one of the things that actually saved Ten Hag in that position was the ongoing takeover process where there was no real remit from the Glazers to make that kind of change while they were in the middle of pretty detailed negotiations with INEOS and others later on. But be that as it may, they did get in around Christmas. Took a little longer to get the approval from the FA and all of that, but they've been there. They wanted responsibility for this, so now they are responsible for it, and that means, of course, it suits the Glazers a little bit. It's kind of funny seeing a lot more criticism of INEOS than the Glazers skating by, which is understandable because these are the guys in control now. They didn't create some of the situations that we're seeing. They didn't create some of the uncertainties, the financial difficulties, and things like that. But they are here. They are in charge, and these are the decisions that count now. Like you said in one of the podcasts prior, a few times, hiring Omar Barada, it's a free hit. Hiring Jason Wilcox, it's a free hit. These are great things to do, but they're free hits. You can't judge them in the same way. Now is where the money makers make their money, really, or they fail, is whether they can make these big decisions and get through them properly to a good outcome. This you mentioned it's quiet, it's sort of silence. It can be kind of unnerving, and it is. Some of that's maybe good, where you don't want to see United briefing the crap out of everything every step along the way, like sometimes they have in the past. But there's obviously a balance to that where it's good if you know, you have some certainty on certain things. You don't need to brief every step of negotiations over a player. You don't need to brief, every step over each target you're getting along the way, because that's really what leads to these long, drawn out kind of feelings where it takes a long time to sign players and everything. But if you don't say anything, sometimes the silence gives the same impression anyway, or worse, that nothing is happening. And usually anything is better than nothing when you're going into a window like this. So as much as we are all extremely tired of talking about it, no matter which side of the fence you sit on or stand on, doesn't really matter. I think everybody is looking for finality on these things.
Yeah, Luke, you're right in saying it's not fair to compare INEOS with clubs that have had systems in place for years where these are easy decisions, because
Yeah.
they've already done the work that INEOS are trying to do right now. And, they're still putting their team in place. And it's better to take the time to make the right decision than to rush into something and make the wrong decision that will need to be fixed later. I fully respect that. And when you're going through a diagnostic process of problems, to me, that always has to be done by someone on the outside. Because when you're asking upper management to do diagnostic problems on a football club that they're part of the problem, you're never going to get the right answer.
Yeah.
Then that can be a process, and then acting upon the advice is not that easy. And so I would hope that we would never see something like this again. I'm trying to be charitable. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to
Yeah.
be in their position. And inevitably, as we said before, they will make mistakes in this process. They will learn from this. They will make different decisions, knowing that. But I also think there has to be a recognition of what United fans have gone through,
Mm-hmm.
and where it's like, okay, this football club every season has had drawn out sagas,
Yeah.
and that's not good for anyone. And when you have a situation like Bruno Fernandes and his agent, and in my opinion, rightfully meeting with other football clubs, because that to me is more of a message to United and INEOS than it is anything else. We'll get to that in a bit. All we're seeing right now, James, is players leaving. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think you can start recruitment until you fix the manager situation. Now,
Sure.
the club might want to recruit the same players, but the player has a say in this. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're losing players like Tosin, I mean, what really can you say to Tosin? I don't know who your manager's going to be, but come sign for us
Yeah.
anyway. But he might not pick you. I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you have for a guy when you've got other football clubs with managers in place. This is how I'm going to use you. This is what we're going to do. Then okay, um, this is where this situation needs to be resolved immediately, because any top player, any player wants to know what manager he's working for.
Yeah.
So United have to start moving. We're in June. I think United's first preseason game, July 14th. That's a lot of work to get done for the start of preseason. A lot.
Yep.
And to me, I think the manager situation, there should have been a review done either before the cup final or immediately after. And there should have been a conversation with Ten Hag going holiday 2 days after the cup final. Let's
Mm-hmm.
get this review done, and
Mm-hmm.
let's address this, and so we can move forward with stability for everyone. But here we are, a week, 10 days, 10 days after the cup final, 10 days, and we still have no idea what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Yep.
That shouldn't be happening. That's
Yeah.
where they deserve some level of criticism to me. And there's some people of the opinion that, well, they don't have to say anything, but they do,
Yeah.
because
They do.
this is a question that comes up repeatedly. The other thing I'm going to say, James, is some of the people they have in place right now are inexperienced at managing or running a club at this level.
Mm-hmm.
And when your technical director, Jason Wilcox, has relationships with some ex-players who he used to play with who are being quite disrespectful to Ten Hag in interviews, and some of things that I've been told by people he knows connected that. Um, I don't think Jason Wilcox is an Eric Ten Hag fan.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can definitely connect some dots there. And I think you can also make a few assumptions. He came in with a month in the season left. 2 weeks later, they were interviewing managers. You can kind of connect the dots there too, as to if that's his remit, then then if he's the one doing that, and we had reports that he was the one who met with McKenna. So I would assume he's the one who's been discussing or talking to other managers as well. Yeah, I think there's some assumptions that can be made there.
I would also say, there's obviously inside the club, there isn't a great atmosphere right now.
Yeah.
And this is not to be completely unexpected, to be fair. When you
Yeah.
Feeling football club, feeling business, and you're after a non-playing staff voluntary redundancies, you're going to piss a lot of people off. And I totally understand why INEOS have to do it.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to have a complete clear out to find out exactly what you need and what's necessary. I understand that. There also has to be a degree of sensitivity, because the morale of staff at all levels at any business is fundamental, is very, very important to success. So whenever you're penny pinching on the bottom end, but there's massive, overindulgence on the top end, you have to get that balance right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understand the need to cut costs, but how you do it is also important. And I think that if you're going to start out where, look, we're just going to demolish everything, I would be concerned about next season, because next season would still be part of that process. You're not going to fix it in 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and I don't think INEOS can write next season off. I keep saying INEOS, it's United, obviously, but
It's United now, yeah.
this is something that they have to get right. And I agree voluntary redundancy is probably the best way to do it, because it gives people the option of taking a payoff and leaving,
Yeah.
rather than having to go in and sack people. But having spoken to people on the non-playing staff side, it's fair to say morale's not great.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about that a month ago, I think, on our podcast, where there was these other cuts and the work from home stuff, and we were saying, look, it's pretty obvious that that's kind of what's going to come next. They want people to quit, right? And I think they're going about it all right. There's not so much you can always do in this situation, but yeah, I mean, I think that overall, one of the things you mentioned that I think is important is about they're probably doing all the right things in a lot of ways that they should be doing, that I guess they have to do, because make no mistake, United is a failing football club. When you look at it relative to its stature, to its history, it's a failing football club. There's no doubt about it. It is not running smooth and successful, and it's okay, and we're just a little ways off. It's failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But where INEOS are probably not missing the boat, I would say, but maybe missing the mark a little bit, is the sensitivity to what we've all been through as fans and as people watching this club. Because, like you say, with the sagas and all of that, yeah, we don't want those sagas, but there's probably a good way to keep communication level where people aren't panicking about what's going on, right? Like with the manager thing taking so long, and the same thing within the staff. It's a hard balance to find, but one that they will need to if they want to keep support. And while fan support at the end of the day will always be tied mostly to winning and losing, you still do want to get, you don't want to make, and you're going to make unpopular decisions. There's a balance to find, and right now maybe it's just ever so slightly off.
Sorry, man, I just got a text message from someone about this whole situation, and yeah, let me put that away. Someone from United. Anyway, so I sort of lost what you said there, the last little bit.
That's okay.
But anyway, it's something that this could get maybe a bit worse before it gets better. Because the upheaval of overhauling this is going to be tough. And James, over the years, maybe I'm not a fair person to ask about this because my views are contaminated by personal relationships. But over the years, I've developed relationships with people at United that
Yeah.
are really, really good people. And we've had our differences with United. I've gone into arguments with them. I've given pieces of my mind. Sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. But that's part of what my job is
Hmm.
not to be a sycophant, is to say what I think is wrong, say what I think is right.
Yep.
And that is that's a responsibility of mine. But I've developed friendships with people that have told me things that are quite disappointing.
Yeah.
If you remove yourself and your personal feelings from it, it may be necessary for some of these things
Yeah.
to happen. um but it just makes me, upsets me a bit, because I would prefer this to be done in a different way. But the thing is, mate, is that we don't know what INEOS's vision is,
Yeah.
and I don't know what United are going to look like when we look like an INEOS football club.
Yeah. It's true. We don't.
And I think one of the reasons why they were a bit reticent with Tosin is because squad players, which I think Tosin would be,
Yes.
United don't want their squad players on massive six-figure salaries,
Yeah.
which I understand, right?
Yeah.
So they're saying, look, if we're going to bring you here and you're not going to be, you're brought here as a squad player, you can't be on 150, 200 grand a week, because that doesn't make any sense. Um, so I think there's some financial, uh, discipline there. But
Yeah.
the thing is, James, is that okay, fine with the squad players, but where's the first team players?
Yeah.
We've already Alvaro Fernandez is gone. Martial's gone. Varane's gone. These players will need to be replaced. They need a left back. They need a centre back. They need a midfielder, possibly a forward, and that's a lot of work to get done at a bare minimum. By the way, possibly more. And that stuff needs to happen pretty quickly. It's possible they may be relaxed about the centre back situation because they're with the Todibo. If they want to sign Todibo, it would be pretty
Hmm.
easy to do, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But then there's other positions that need to be addressed. Plus, we still have the Sancho situation. You still have to deal with Mason Greenwood and a number of other players that need to be moved on. So it's a lot of work that needs to get done. But you know, I have to treat any of us the same way we treat any other owners. And like you said, I'm optimistic that they're here. I'm glad that they're here. Uh, I think the only thing that would, if we were still in the grips of the Glazers running this football club, I'd be very, very concerned about what capabilities you have going forward,
Yeah.
um, financially and otherwise. But, there was a story put out a week ago by Ben Jacobs, um, which hasn't been mentioned much, about there being a disagreement between Brailsford and Blanc over what should be done with Ten Hag. Blanc wanted to give him a year, and an extra year. Brailsford disagreed with that. Now that's something I talked to you about, I think, a day or two before that story came out, because I know that there was truth to that. The question then becomes: is should Dave Brailsford be making football decisions?
I don't think any of them should, frankly, given the positions that they're in, right? And kind of where, you know, how the way that INEOS want to run the club. Jim Ratcliffe in an earlier interview talked about you appoint these people, that they made mistakes at Nice by doing almost just that, where there was a bit of time where Sir Dave was, I think, much more involved in making the day-to-day decisions about hirings, things like that in the past. And, talked about appointing kind of this top-down way of doing things. I don't think, in my opinion, it's sort of a funny thing. I don't want to see Sir Dave Brailsford making the decision on manager or on transfers. I don't want to see Sir Jim making the decisions on managers or transfers. And Blanc, while is probably more qualified, is probably not the right person either, because he's not really going to be in that position in 40 days from now. It's Omar Barada. Blanc has more been focused on the commercial aspects of football over his career as well. And that, of course, is where a bit of the challenge is, though. You have Omar Barada, Dan Ashworth, who's not there yet, and Jason Wilcox. And really, at the end of the day, that's where the decision should solely lie on a lot of these things. Now, obviously, everything's in the end going to be approved by owners and board members and things like that. That's just the nature of business. But no matter what any of them think, I mean, that's where it gets dangerous when it starts getting into, X, Y, Z's opinion, this person's opinion versus that person's opinion. That's where you get into trouble, and where INEOS can get into trouble if they let those things influence, the outcomes, because I don't think anybody's ever going to agree entirely, especially among people who are not totally, football people or totally involved. And so the biggest thing is, and I think where the mistake has been made, of course, by the Glazers, was Joel being involved and having his own advisors and things like that, and sticking his hands into things that he shouldn't be, and not allowing Richard Arnold and Ed Woodward and these people who are not qualified being the ones making those decisions. And I don't think that and that would be dangerous for INEOS to start off by doing that, if that is having too much influence on the discussion. And obviously the complication is that they don't have everybody in place yet, but I'm quite sure that whatever happens will be backed by Omar Barada, whether he's in place or not. I mean, you've seen stories already about him maybe being involved in things maybe he's not supposed to be in. So I'm sure it's not going to be completely without his say, whatever happens.
At this point, it'd be more of a surprise if they kept Ten Hag than if they sacked him. So it does look very much like he won't be here. And I haven't spoken to anyone at United about any of the players or the reps about this, since pre-FA Cup. Because obviously most of them aren't there, but up until then they didn't know a lot happens in a week. I think that at this moment it would be more of a surprise if they did keep him. So who replaces him? Because to me, the candidates that are being mentioned the most are completely uninspiring. And what about Xavi?
That's an interesting name. Personally, I don't know that he would be the guy that I would bring in. Obviously, he's left Barcelona now. I mean, he's got the experience. He's got, obviously now has done that. Won a league, has done quite a bit. I mean, you could see it. I don't know enough about him to say how great it would be or not, but sure, if he's available and he would want it, you could say that'd be somebody they might want to consider. I think he's probably not. I think he probably intends to take some time off, but it has more merit than some of the names, and obviously we could, that's, I think, one of the biggest fears that people have, right, about letting Ten Hag go is some of the names that have been mentioned are very difficult for people to get their head around and to be convinced of, totally understandably, right? I think there's names that have been mentioned and ones that haven't, that make sense, and then there's obviously the reverse of that. I think we've talked about it and said, you can see understanding why they might choose someone like Pochettino, right? That it kind of can make sense. Is he better than Ten Hag? Don't know. Maybe it's a sideways move, but maybe he just gets along with them better. It can be things like that when new people come in. Thomas Tuchel's won quite a lot, over the course of his career's experience, but maybe he doesn't get along with them. It's hard to say there. But certainly there's names like that. There's others that haven't been mentioned that could be interesting if they were to come up. If they're still exploring, maybe we will hear about some of these names, but certainly I think there's a lot of risks to some of the names that have been linked if it's going really poorly.
Yeah, someone like Xavi, Pochettino, Tuchel, I could understand because their track record, suggests that they're worthy appointees, and I cannot understand Thomas Frank. I cannot understand Graham Potter. I cannot understand De Zerbi. I mean, Ten Hag's won more than in England combined. I mean,
Yeah.
what if they are your choices? What's your criteria? You know, and
Right.
that's I would like to know that. Not because you were mates with them at Brighton, or because you were mates with them here, or because you like. These are irrelevant factors. These have nothing
Mm.
to do with whether you should be the Manchester United manager or not. In fact, there are probably reasons why you shouldn't be. Just because you're a mate
It's,
doesn't mean anything.
yeah, especially because the other names are available.
Yes.
The other names you mentioned before, they are available. So you can't say there's nobody in the market, and that's why you went with those guys.
Right. It's so for me, it's like one of the things that's important for Ten Hag is that he has veto over transfers.
Hmm.
That was the conditions he came to United on,
Yeah.
and that is an important condition for him. And I think it was also an important condition for Pochettino at Chelsea, which it is for a lot of managers, because they don't want players imposed upon them that they don't rate or they don't think fits their system, because ultimately this causes problems in the dressing room when you don't get played. Especially if you're a player, let's say you're from a country that has three or four other players in that dressing room, it's very easy to then become disillusioned and then start, clicks, right? Um, and this is what I mean by you can't sign players until you know who the manager is, because the manager has to have a say on whether that player comes. And if a manager doesn't have veto and a player meets with me, and I'm a manager, I would say, I'm not going to pick you if you come here. I mean, I can't stop you
Yeah.
coming here. The club will send you anyway, but I'm not going to pick you. I don't think United want to have a manager in that position, but then that means that whoever's doing your recruitment has to be perfect,
Hmm.
and they can't make mistakes. And that means
Yeah.
if the team fail, then your recruitment guy goes too,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Because this is the manager's job now is unrecognizable compared to what Ferguson did,
Yeah.
compared to what this is comparing managers over here is pointless, because you're essentially now just a glorified coach, just a coach
Hmm.
that picks the team, that has these players assigned to you. Okay, now you go make the best of what you have. And then you ask why you don't have a playing style. I mean, the manager has to have input in that. That to me, that they may be the most important voice in the whole discussion about whether a player suits them or not. Um, Ultimately, their job's on the line, and they're responsible for the people that they work for, that work for them. If you're a manager in any other business and you're hiring somebody, you have to have a say in who's coming into your department.
Yeah.
Otherwise, especially if your job depends on their performance, you have to be compatible in terms of personality. You have to have equivalent values, everything, and you have to suit the ideology of the manager. So to me, I think that you know I still want Ten Hag to be a vital, or any United manager for that matter, to be vital in the recruitment of players. So I'm not saying that they are the be all and end all, but I still think it's important that they have a say. Casemiro, we've talked about this on the podcast before numerous times.
Yep.
Um, so he, story came out today that Ronaldo's been trying to convince him to sign for Al Nassr. And I have it on good authority that that's been going on for a while, as we've
Yep.
mentioned many times. Would seem highly improbable that Casemiro will still stay this season. What happened in the FA Cup final is a bit weird. But even
Yes.
prior to that, he very much looked like a player that wasn't going to be here next season. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of been going this way for a while. There's a few things that have happened, obviously, even publicly. He talked about not really enjoying or being fair on the criticism of playing at center back. He got dropped by the Brazilian national team, and some things came out through Brazil, the same day, which, you can put two and two together. There were things with comments about more football earlier in the year that I think resulted in a bit of friction there. Um, and then
And the
you
fact
take a
his
couple.
signings constantly used as an example by the new owners of bad business
Yeah,
identification.
that too. That Casemiro has come up in quite a few articles about. I don't think Casemiro feels the love. I don't think Casemiro feels the love, not from fans, but from the coach, from the organization, and from leadership. I think it's something they may all be on the same page on, that they haven't been giving him, you know, glowing reviews. Um, Yeah, it seems quite likely that he's on his way out, and he didn't even stay around for the celebrations. I mean, he left pretty quick.
Yeah, and again, James, then comes the second part of this question. So who comes in? If you're looking at Fofana because he's 35 million, that's the wrong reason.
Sure.
The European champions, the 15-time European champions, who are United's benchmark, just won the European Cup. When was it? The day after they announced Kylian Mbappe. Now, I'm not expecting anything remotely in that neighbourhood from United, but if that's your standard, then you can't be going out and bringing in Fofana as Casemiro's replacement. You need to go out and bring in somebody of a top level. And, I'm not going to judge INEOS or United before they've done anything because we don't know what's going to happen. But what it looks like to me right now is their immediate priority is cutting costs.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be repetitive, but they have no idea what they're in for if you need to start, have an underwhelming summer and start poorly. And they cannot lose people like Bruno Fernandes. These people, don't give in a new contract. And, I know there's diversity of opinion on this and that they should let him go. This is not Football Manager. Okay. And you cannot just, let's sell a few players, get a bunch of money, go out and sign a bunch of kids and they'll come in and be brilliant. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
United are in Real Madrid's position, they can let Bruno Fernandes go. If they're stacked with quality where it's not going to be a huge difference, okay. But they're not. They're a team that's finished 8th. And he's one of the only world-class players United have that they can't lose, that's fit every week. 3 years from now, if they're in a much better position and they've got him on a 4-year deal, then you can let him go. But not right now. And if you can't convince your best players to stay with your current ambition, how do you convince other top players to come?
Yeah, it is definitely that is a concern, and it's a bit of a tricky debate because, just sort of hinted at earlier a little bit. You take, for example, one of the big pushes from INEOS that, again, it's a situation they didn't create, but it's a reality that they're going to have to resolve properly without the team turning to crap, is the wage situation. We've known for years that United's wages are inflated out the roof. I mean, Rafael Varane, for his availability, was being paid something like $1 million per game. These are big things. There's something like 700,000 a game. Jadon Sancho's on enormous wages and isn't even there. Casemiro's on huge wages. For a long time, United's strategy has been to win signings with wages, right? To just give the best money possible, and that's how they're able to attract talent, which only goes so far. It only works if you actually win. And can keep affording to do that. And so it's kind of a fine balancing act here because, they're not going to, for example, like you mentioned, Tosin, Chelsea winning that. They obviously offered more money than Newcastle. And some of the Newcastle reports say that they were offering over 100,000 a week. The last thing INEOS want to do is come in and be paying 150,000 a week for rotation players, because then this is what drives the problem with players like Rashford, players like Bruno as well. When you've got backups making 150, which United do have, and more, then what do you deserve? Bruno Fernandes, who plays every game, who contributes so much more and is way more vital to the team. In most clubs, he'd be getting more than double, what a rotation player will get, but the rotation players might be on a bit lower. And that is a serious problem. And so, again, a situation they didn't create, but one they have to solve without losing, because, we've kind of debated this, you and I, about Bruno, where you don't want to lose him. I don't think either party actually wants to go. I don't think he wants to leave. I don't think that INEOS want to lose him from the team because it is hard to replace and it can move you backwards, losing players like that, and too much upheaval and too much youth and not enough leaders in the dressing room absolutely can be problematic. At the same time, I can see why they might be looking at it and saying, we don't want to give 5 more years on 300,000 a week on huge wages, where 2 years from now, this becomes a huge problem for us.
Why would it become a
Um,
huge problem 2 years from now?
if he
Look at
declines, I
Modric
mean,
and the
I
new
just give an
deal.
example though.
Look at Modric just saying, just going to come back. Was he
Yeah,
37?
but that's only a
So
year, right? I
no, I
mean,
know, but he's what is he, 37 right now? 36,
yeah,
37. You know, 2
yeah,
years from now, Bruno's 31.
yeah,
You know, I'm not,
yeah,
I'm not saying I wouldn't. I'm just saying I don't
yeah.
understand how it would be. Like, to me, Bruno Fernandes always plays. He's always fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think United can turn around and say 2 years from now this is a problem. We need to deal with where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if in 2 years from now United are sitting, challenging for the title, and you're generating all this revenue from the Champions League and from your success, I don't think it's that big a problem. I think that Real Madrid and other football clubs show how you have contingency to move these players on. They're on huge wages where it's not a problem. What you do is you bring in a Camavinga and Tchouaméni for contingency,
Yeah,
Valverde, so that you could start phasing these players out.
yeah.
Right? To me, projecting where you might be 2 years from now, Jim Ratcliffe may not even be here 2 years from now. Who knows? You
Yeah,
know,
I
you
mean,
know, who knows where you need to be? But
yeah,
right now they cannot lose someone like Bruno Fernandes. I don't care if they go out and buy João Neves. I wonder what Bruno Fernandes would say to João Neves, by the way, or Gonçalo Inácio. They are not going to come in and play to that standard immediately. And United don't have anyone else remotely that can fill that void. Look what happened when Bruno Fernandes was out for a couple of weeks.
oh yeah, for
Right?
sure.
I mean, United were a mess, total mess. Then he comes back, and now the football club's transfer. We're talking about a player here, James, that's on
Yeah,
a level of Kevin De Bruyne.
yeah,
And Man United don't have another player like that. Not just in terms of his ability, but in terms of his, leadership. And he's a type of player that will get even better as United improve. And
mm-hmm.
to me, I think it's unthinkable that any project, I'm gonna use that word, that any of us are involved in, they lose their best player the first
Yeah,
season.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I
you just
agree.
can't.
Well, we talked about it a while back, asking like who would we definitely not lose, and we both said Bruno and Rashford at that time would be players you don't want to because it is really harder to replace than people think. Um, I think the concern, honestly, is that they don't have the money and they have all these other things to do. Like I think the financial situation is worse than people believe it is. You know, with
We
United,
don't have the money to keep Bruno Fernandes.
no. But wait.
God
Let me
help them.
let me finish this. I
Honestly,
know,
the football club, that's the case because there's no happy ending here.
Yeah, but there are a lot of things they have to do this summer. And I can understand if I'm them saying, look, sit tight. Let's get through our window and sign the players we need to sign to fill all of these positions because there's a lot they've got to do, right? We know that. And they have to do a good job of that and have it be something that they can approach later on. Like I guess I would say when you have so many signings to make, I don't know that I would put a new contract for him on my top priority at the moment. You don't know where you're going to end by the end of the
He's the most
year, and he
important
does
thing
have
that
3 years though, but he
yeah,
still has 3 years, and he did sign that deal.
but
He could stay.
he could stay, but United need a happy, committed Bruno Fernandes. They don't need another disillusioned player on the pitch. Marcus
Mhm.
Rashford has a new contract. Do they need another situation like this? They need another situation like Casemiro.
Yeah.
This isn't just about money for Bruno Fernandes. This is about commitment. This is about, and he's rightfully, in my opinion, asking the football club a question: where's your ambition? This is the question that I'm asking as a fan. Where is it?
Yeah.
And look, there's competing opinions on this. I've seen the Swedish Ramble do stuff where, they've clearly, I'm not intelligent enough to know what's factual and what isn't on the financial side, but where it would be very easy if you needed to go out and spend really good money this summer and recruit properly. So, you know, if any of us's idea of running United is let's cut a bunch of costs, let's run this football club like it's a mid-table Brighton, and that'll lead us to success, fucking God help them, because they're in for the shock of their life. Because you will not, this was not what was sold to United fans,
Hmm.
and you cannot win the Premier League by buying Brighton level players. You can develop players and make money off that model,
Yeah.
but you're going to continuously finish 7th and 8th. The biggest clubs will, ask Arsene Wenger about this. Every time they got a decent player, once they got to their peak, they got picked off because that's, they can't win the league there. And this is exactly the question players are going to. You think you're going to keep Casemiro doing this? You think you're going to keep Garnacho doing this? You talk about building a team around them, building what around them? Brighton players. Because what you're saying to Manu and what you're saying to Garnacho and players like that is once you get really good, you can go. Right? Otherwise, give me a reason to stay. Beyond my heart, beyond the fact I love this football club and from my city, that works for a while.
Yeah.
And then these players get to a certain level and that novelty wears off. And then they're 22, 23, and they're like, there's no progress here. And they'll leave. This is until you fix this problem. So, you don't buy Manchester United and then that's your ambition. And I understand you have to have financial discipline. There's a lot of things wrong. Okay. But they looked at those books before they did this. And if someone had sat down and said, look, this football club is a financial mess. You're not going to be able to recruit on a level that's going to put United back to where they claimed they were going to put United back to in their initial offering statement, because it's just you can't mitigate these financial losses and still recruit. So INEOS, in my opinion, owe United fans an interview, which we wanted from the Glazers when they took over, which we didn't get. What your vision is? What exactly is your plan? Because the fans aren't just getting it. It's not just like we aren't getting it. The players aren't getting it. Nobody sat down with the players and said, this is our vision. This is what we want to do. This is our ambition. This is how we're going to go about it. Otherwise, Bruno Fernandes would have an answer to his question. And so would all the players. So to me, James, when you're, this is a big concern to me. Maybe it's a consequence of the fact that I have, like I said before, trust issues with United owners and I'm being unfair. But this is something where I'm looking at going, okay, give me a reason to believe.
And I get that. I agree. I think that part of the issue, again, is that there are a lot of unknowns, because I think there can be a lot of opinions and a lot of things. And it's hard to say who's right and what the exact right answer is, but that's what they're supposed to figure out. And that's what they're in charge to do. And I do think that the biggest thing now is, I actually would agree with what you said there really very much, that they need to settle the manager thing. And then I think they should come out and speak pretty directly and openly about where they're going moving forward, to us and to the players and the people, because whatever you're setting forward is, you're going to have to get that buy-in from the players to work. There's that's going to help a lot. No amount of money will make up for not getting that buy-in from people, from the players, to get people happy. We've seen that players they get bigger wages and it still doesn't work out. I mean, Marcus Rashford got a new contract and had a pretty unhappy season for reasons that are, he's not totally absolved from, but for certainly things that have to do with him as well, that have to do with the club and the direction that things are going. We've seen that before. But they've got to do that. They've got to get buy-in from everybody. And I think that again, like you said, some of it is the if we hadn't been through so many years of poor Glazer ownership, you'd be a little less cynical, a little less jaded. All of us would be, I think. But given that, I think they do need to be, if that is one thing I would say, they have to improve, because so little time has passed in some respect. They still have a whole summer to do things right. And I know things happen pretty quickly and they have to make things happen pretty quickly. But I think that there does have to be a sensitivity to United fans about the reality of what we've all seen, and to the players too, because there are the ones on the pitch. They are the ones playing, guys like Bruno, who signed, the broken promises, the things that they've gone through. Just because the names changed on the ownership, and it hasn't really changed, but just because the names have changed in terms of who's maybe signing the checks or maybe who's, running the show up there, it doesn't instill people with confidence automatically. They have to feel that from them. And I think that that communication is the best thing that they could do, because that is also what the Glazers promised to do 20 years ago when they bought the club, was to communicate, and they never did. And Jim and the INEOS cannot be like that. They cannot have an interview one time in the beginning and it all sounds good. 6 months later, we don't hear anything. A year later, we don't hear anything. 2 years later, we don't hear anything. It's got to be constant, regular, and open. Not just at the start, but all the way through. And I think that would help people feel a lot better about the situation too.
Look, I also understand they can't be coming out saying we're going to go out and spend hundreds of millions, right, which is just stupid, right? I totally understand that. And there's been times where I felt that Jim Ratcliffe hasn't been the smartest in how he's gone about public communication. For example, I don't think he was particularly smart in almost taunting Newcastle to say they should have common sense with Dan Ashworth, because I don't know if that helps saying that publicly. And maybe he has turned around and said I should say less publicly. I understand that, but there has to be some level of communication as to exactly what is going to happen in the immediate. All right, let's finish up. I want to talk about what Jose Mourinho said about Sancho. By the way, I could listen to Mourinho talk all day.
I know.
The evolution of his personality and character has been something quite interesting to watch.
Yeah.
But I thought the way his words were framed were really disingenuous, because they picked out one excerpt, created a headline, and if you actually listen to what he said it within. It was not reported the way he said it. In many ways, what he said was a defense of Erik ten Hag and exactly what what we had pointed out before. Look, the problem is almost never when a player has these environmental and personality issues. A lot of it's down to them. It's down to the people around them. It's down to their personality. It's down to so many other variables that a manager can't control. And so when he said, yes, he hasn't got the best out of him, I didn't see that as a criticism of Ten Hag. It was more of an acknowledgement of all the things that are going on that are affecting Jadon Sancho and why he hasn't been able to perform at his, fulfill his potential, you could say. The rumours, the Mirror was saying yesterday Sancho would come back if Ten Hag was sacked. I don't know if he's reading the sentiment of United fans accurately, if he feels that way, because a lot of United fans, even if Ten Hag was sacked,
they
aren't in love with the idea of Sancho coming back. I'm not sure where Sancho would play if he came back. I would be surprised if he plays for United again. I don't want him to go out on loan again. But it's hard to see how much United would actually get for him right now. But, Laura Woods, who I think is an exceptional journalist, kept pushing Jose Mourinho to say something that he wouldn't say, to be baited. Did United fail him? Did the manager, did the environment fail him? Just say something that would create a headline. He didn't, so they created a headline anyway out of nothing. And I've sat here, James, for a couple of weeks watching a complete love-in with Jurgen Klopp, leaving the football club, who won the same number, who, by the way, Ten Hag has won more trophies than in the last 2 years, but nonetheless. The love-in with Guardiola, great manager that he is, enormous question marks over him. And then the love-in with Ange Postecoglou that we had, and Emery that we had, Ten Hag never gets that treatment. I mean, you had Alison Rudd from the Times, the minute he was doing his first press conference, criticizing his clothes, his accent, his language, his character, his person. I mean, it's really despicable. And I've said this before, if we were to say that about other people, we'd find that completely unacceptable. I mean, that to me is like a sackable offense. If the journalist wrote that, I would be livid, because what that shows is scandalous bias. That none of these things have any relevance to evaluate Ten Hag as a human being, as a manager, and nor should they have any relevance to evaluating anybody. And I would completely disagree with everything that she said. I mean, really is vicious personal nonsense. And I think this is what managers need to do. They create stories always, and negativity always sells more than positivity. I think the likes of Henry Winter have been exceptional, brilliant journalist, very balanced, and has, in my opinion, cut through all the nonsense But a lot of this is really unfair on Ten Hag. He wins the FA Cup, and all he gets asked about is his future. I mean,
Yeah.
really, 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 really low level stuff. And yeah, I was not surprised that a headline and a story was created as something that wasn't actually said.
For sure, and I thought that the discussion from Jose was quite good. You know, it was quite balanced about the whole situation, and it's not intended to be taken as, you know, the manager screwed it all up at all. That was not the message of it, you know. And it's great to hear from him. It's nice that he's, you know, getting into management. We'll see how he likes Turkey, because that's going to be an interesting job for Jose Mourinho. But yeah, and then the following story afterwards about Sancho and coming back, if Ten Hag isn't the manager and all that. I mean, some of it can be information, some of it can be probably a bit of an assumption. You know, it's obvious he's not coming back to play under Ten Hag. We all know that. There's no chance of that ever happening. The question will, of course, be, is anybody going to pay the money for him? And you know, it's also in United's, I think, best interest as well, right? To have the story be that he could return in some respect, which makes it a little bit of a challenging scenario at the moment. But you know, if they really do want to sell him, if they want to get the best value for him, then it'd be best to have it be a bit more open like that. But yeah, United have certainly always been this way. You know, where it just stuff gets created out of nothing, and again, that's a bit of the danger with the silence. You know, the vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and when there's a vacuum of noise, and I know journalists abhor a vacuum too. So when there's a absence of noise, people are going to fill it, and that's something that happens, and you can lose control pretty quickly of what's going on out there.
Well, they rarely fill it charitably, and
Yeah.
it's usually, if there's, you know, an extrapolation, it's usually negative because it sells. So we will see what happens. Most likely, we'll be back next week, because I would hope, by the time we're sitting here a week from now, things are not the same, and we're having a conversation about something else.
Yeah, if there's no clarity by next Monday, we'll be back, because it'll just be an hour of ranting at this fact that nothing's happened for another week anyway.
I know. Well, hopefully we do have some answers next week.
Yeah.
You know, it really is bordering on ridiculous that's carried on this long. And just to clarify something, I think Mourinho will love Turkey. I think
Yeah.
fans are incredible. It's a fanatical
Yeah.
place. They love their football. And for a guy like him who's passionate, that is he feeds off that. You know, we got that with the Roma fans. The football clubs that are very passionate, Mourinho does really well at, and I think he'll enjoy it out there. But all right, folks, we leave it there. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on my platform, or James, as always, or on our YouTube channels. It's always the best way you can support the pod. Of course, we'll be back again next week. And we appreciate your downloads, appreciate your support. I hope you're having a nice summer. We'll be back next week. See you later, folks. Cheers, James.
Yeah.
See you, mate.
Bye.